Hey all, Zach here. After the great success of my previous Hidden Gems video, I've decided to do another. This time however, I'm gonna expand the horizons and will shed some spotlight to episodes not just from the hit era, but across every era. That means that at least one episode from the classic, hit, Nitrogen, Mattel, and Big World Big Adventures era respectively is included on the list. Without any further ado, let's examine 10 hidden gems across every era of Thomas and Friends.
Percy's driver hadn't seen the bike and he started away. "Oh no!" cried Percy. "Now there'll be trouble." And there was.
Season 4 was at its best when it came to making the island of Sodor feel like a real place you would want to visit. The stunning visuals and the beautiful cinematography are so impressive and never quite reached the same peak that Season 4 had. Season 4 also has a great range of tone in its stories, such as somber, hilarious, fast-paced action, emotional, and of course, comfy. I love the episodes that slow down and let the audience live in this world for a while. Mind That Bike is one of those aforementioned episodes and I love it. The first third of the episode just focuses on Tom Tipper delivering the mail to all the various locations around the island, and it's just so pleasing to look at. I also love that we get some more focus on the mail train, which is a concept created by Chris Awdry. In fact, this is the only story in the Railway series to feature the mail train, but fortunately the TV series saw the potential in it and made it a mainstay for the remainder of the entire show. What I also really like is that in typical Sodor fashion, everything that could go wrong goes wrong, and only because of one mishap after the other does Tom Tipper's master realize that paying for a van is the right thing to do after all. Cutting down costs should only be done if it also improves efficiency, and I love that this episode shares some focus on that.
That accident did me a good turn, Percy. My chief decided a new van would do the job. Much better than another bike and worth the expense. Now, I can always be on time again.
I do have to say though that this episode was a poor choice as the finale for the season. That honour definitely should have gone to Paint Pots and Queens, and I wish that those episodes would have swapped places.
No engines ever felt prouder than those on the Fat Controller's Railway.
That would have absolutely been the perfect note to go out on. Other than that, Mind That Bike is a great episode that manages to capture the beauty of the island of Sodor flawlessly.
Emily headed back down the steep hill again. But then there was trouble.
Season 19 is notorious for many things. It is without a doubt the strongest Brenner season when it comes to continuity. The animation is absolutely breathtaking and becomes the new norm for the next few years. And akin to season 3, this season really dives deep into the characters and explores different sides of them. However, it is also the season to shoehorn Thomas into every episode again, to really flanderize its characters and to diverge into a much more cartoony writing style that just isn't Thomas.
A strapping fellow, a picture of robust good health. Watch. 1, 2.
What the fuck? But when a season 19 episode does get its characters right, boy does it get them right. Best engine ever, in all honesty, is my favorite Emily episode. There are plenty of good ones to choose from. Her introductory story, Emily's New Coaches, is pretty solid. Many of her hit era episodes are quite good, most notably Emily's New Route, Halloween, and Emily and the Special Coaches. Even some of the other CGI Emily episodes like Dowager Hat's Busy Day or No Snow for Thomas are quite enjoyable. This one, however, trumps them all, and here's why. I love Emily's arc in this episode. She feels depressed for several days and nothing can cheer her up. You genuinely feel so bad for her. Only when she manages to prevent a violent collision does she get her confidence back. And now both Caitlin and Emily have deep respect for one another and happily drive off into the sunset. What a perfect closure. I love how this episode spotlights two female characters for a change without ever making a fuss about it. If you want to include more femininity into your show, this is how you do it, by simply using your existing female cast and writing stories about them. How is that difficult to comprehend, Mattel? I also love the strong continuity in this one. Not only are the events of it mentioned in No Help at All,
But Emily is at the Steamworks, and Mavis is at the Diesel Works, and I sent Salty to the mainland.
but Emily having difficulties can already be seen in Salty All at Sea, where she can be spotted alone in the sheds. I also just love how both Caitlin and Emily admire one another. Emily envisions to become streamlined herself.
Can't the engineers do something to change my shape, Victor?
Why would you want to do that? You're a great engine, Emily, just the way you are.
And Caitlin wishes to be a more conventional British steam engine with an actual buffer beam.
This is why I don't do pushing. It always messes up my skirt. I wish I had buffers at the front like you.
There's no jealousy involved at all, it's just that both of them are a little insecure, you know? I like how Caitlin gets to do Emily a favour, only for her to return the same favour a few days later. In conclusion, this episode is an absolute masterpiece and one of Andrew Brenner's magnum opuses.
That night, Thomas and James watched the fireworks together.
I think we are both useful engines.
Said James proudly. But we are most useful when we work together, puffed Thomas.
Strangely enough, James and Thomas were characters who never ever got paired up in the Railway series. These two have only interacted with each other thrice in the books. Their friendship rivalry is entirely exclusive to the TV series, and the show's writers knew that they struck gold with it. One thing that I really enjoy about the James and Thomas dynamic is that the formula always varies from episode to episode. Sometimes one of them is clearly in the wrong and has to apologize by the end. At other times, both of them are competitive airheads and neither of them comes out on top. Sometimes one of them tries to talk sense to the other, and on rare occasions, both of them are working together to achieve the same goal. This episode is one of those examples and is also one of my personal favorite James and Thomas stories. A firework display is to be held at Knapford for the night and James is tasked to deliver the fireworks accordingly. Thomas becomes envious of course, but he immediately puts his jealousy aside when he hears that James has broken down.
Hello, busted boiler, teased Thomas. You don't look very useful now.
The clock is ticking and despite the team making good time, they couldn't have accounted for the signal that hinders them from progressing. Sir Topham Hatt meanwhile suspects that James and Thomas won't make it in time and decides to cancel the firework display. But thanks to Thomas's splendid idea of using one of the rockets as an alarm, everything gets sorted out at the end. The two make amends and enjoy the firework together. I think what I love the most about the episode is that both James and Thomas are smart for once. Instead of bringing out the worst in each other as they usually do, they both know that working together takes priority in this situation. Thomas's character usually flip-flops so drastically in the hit era, so it's nice to see him portrayed accurately for once. Insolent and easy to anger, but also determined and willing to put petty rivalries aside in case of an emergency. With this being a James and Thomas story, there are a lot of golden moments to be found here. I love how Thomas lets his anger out on the trucks.
Thomas shunted the last truck crossly into place. The trucks were glad that job was finished.
I love how James becomes pouty after Thomas's teasing.
You said I wasn't useful, he pouted.
And I love how they both whistle in desperation when the damn signal won't let them pass through.
We're here, they cried, and sounded their whistles as loudly as they could. But no one could hear them.
Season 8 was the last ever season of the entire series to really incorporate interactions between the engines and their crew, which is a sad realization to make, but I really love how the crews play a role in the story. I like how James's driver explains what had happened and how Thomas asks his driver to light a rocket. The drivers playing roles and having dialogue in the episode really makes such a big difference when it comes to realism. It does happen very occasionally in later seasons, but season 8 truly is the last season to have drivers play an integral part in the story, as opposed to being portrayed as the engine's hands, allowing them to do the most stupid stuff imaginable, like pouring syrup onto a statue, stealing hats, or pouring coal onto a calliope. I give season 8 this. It was definitely a step down in comparison to what came before, but the show was definitely not dead just yet. Overall, Thomas and the Firework Display is a very entertaining episode that subverts the usual trope and is a standout for that alone.
I made a silly decision not to fetch Victor. We need to bother Victor. Please, will you fetch him?
Of course I will, Peter Sam.
It shouldn't come to anyone's surprise that if I had to pick an episode from the Nitrogen era, it would have to be this one. Don't Bother Victor is notorious for being the only Nitrogen episode to solely take place on the narrow gauge railway. The episode The Christmas Tree Express also has a narrow gauge engine as the main lead. It's a Renius episode in which he shares the lead role with Toby. However, this one just takes place on a standard gauge railway with a narrow gauge engine being pulled around on a flatbed, akin to Thomas and Sculloi's Big Day Out from season 10. This episode's plot is reminiscent of the season 11 episode Sir Handel and Charge, in which Mr. Percival also has an appointment with Sir Topham Hatt and puts one of his engines in charge for the day. As with every episode from the Nitrogen era, there are many problems present throughout its runtime that this era is notorious for. Characters are conveniently present for a certain scenario, the engines can magically switch directions, the engines act dumb just so that the plot can happen, and of course the repetitive 3 strikes formula that every single Nitrogen episode is plagued with. However, there are also many positives with this one. It is of course greatly appreciated to have an episode take place entirely on the narrow gauge railway for once, which is always a great change from the norm. Not only that, but Nitrogen Studios really went hard on the animation here. All the varied rolling stock, the great renders of the engines, and the beautiful set design are all so pleasing to look at. Plus, the fantastic casting for all the narrow gauge engines, who all sound perfect.
Sir Handel is creaking and croaking at the halt.
What a magnificent tree!
My funnel is blocked. I can't puff or chuff.
It was
Probably a runaway truck, Thomas.
Because the Thin Controller said not to bother you until your visit.
This episode also deserves some props for having a sense of restraint. No wackiness, gimmicks or repetitive rhyming are present here, and while Peter Sam acts pretty stupidly, I think he wasn't fully in the wrong here. Victor is a busy engine after all, and I can understand that he doesn't want to bother him with even more work. Peter Sam making silly mistakes also kinda feels true to his character, as he isn't known to be the brightest bulb anyway. The characters in general are fine in this one, with none of them feeling horribly mischaracterized as they usually were in the Hit era. Renius is a notable highlight, being portrayed as his wise usual self, who only wants to lend a helping buffer. I love the scene where he gets annoyed with Peter Sam and just copies what he's saying.
We mustn't bother Victor with little things.
It should also be noted that Duncan was mentioned, but as we all know, the real-life Douglas was undergoing an overhaul, and therefore he couldn't be measured and accurately recreated into CGI. But I do like that they bothered to mention him at least. This is also one of those episodes in which the main character fixes their own mistakes by themselves instead of being reprimanded by an authority figure first, which is nice. I wanna preface that this is by no means a great episode, but the many positives it does have just barely pushes it into okay territory for me. As I had to choose one Nitrogen episode for this list, I figured that I should at least choose the best one there is. I think we can all unanimously agree that Happy Birthday Sir and Don't Bother Victor are tied as the best episodes to come out of the Nitrogen era, with both of them being from season 16 ironically. Don't Bother Victor truly is a hidden gem to be found in an absolutely atrocious era.
The next morning, Henry had to take some workmen to the forest. But the workmen were carrying saws and axes.
When it comes to Henry's portrayal in the Hit era, it tended to be a mixed bag at times. Sometimes he is shown to be grumpy, easily irritated, or provocative, which are all accurate depictions of Henry's character we all know and love. We also get some focus on the Henry and Gordon dynamic from time to time, which is nice. And other times, Henry is shown to be vulnerable or just a little naive.
Maybe you're right. Maybe I do have lucky trucks.
Yikes. But the thing that the Hit era like to play with the most regarding Henry's character is his love for nature. 3 episodes that cover Henry's fascination with the forest, 2 of which that are pretty bad and 1 that is pretty good. Henry and the Wishing Tree isn't a bad concept for a story, but retconning the fact that Henry never pulls passenger trains really stings. But fortunately, Henry is shown to pull coaches just fine in other season 8 episodes and the later Hit seasons.
Henry wished he would never have to pull passengers ever again. Just in case.
What? Henry Gets It Wrong is also pretty bad, mainly for the reason that Henry completely gets away for not only betraying the other engines initially, but also for blocking the entire main line. It also doesn't help that this episode's plot is straight up copied from a previous episode. Henry and the Flagpole, on the other hand, is a much better story, and I would even go as far as to say that this is Henry's best episode in the Hit era. Henry is to collect a new flagpole for Callan Castle's banquet. He doesn't realize that the flagpole has already been unloaded and accidentally rams it off the flatbed. Henry is now worried that the woodsmen are going to cut down the tall pine tree and takes them onto a fool's errand. Once he's found out and scolded by Topham, Edward takes the woodsman, and Henry's fear only worsens. I think what I like the most about this episode is that Henry isn't portrayed as stupid. Everything he goes through and every decision he makes, albeit irrational ones, is comprehensible and logically portrayed. It makes perfect sense for Henry to look for something tall when he arrives at Brendam, only to be surprised to find out that the flagpole has already been loaded onto the flatbed. I totally get how Henry would think that the woodsmen are gonna cut down the old pine tree after seeing them equipped with saws and pickaxes. And I can also totally see why Henry would attempt to find a new flagpole for the castle himself. Henry isn't brain dead, he's just overprotective of something he loves. I am so glad that unlike in Henry Gets It Wrong, Henry doesn't really do any harm here. He doesn't take the woodsmen where they need to go to, yes, but at least he doesn't delay trains of other engines or blocks the entire 3-track main line. There are a lot of little things sprinkled throughout the episode that I liked. I like how Henry vents to Toby about his incident, only for him to accidentally worsen Henry's fear.
I wish I hadn't broken the flagpole, Henry sighed to Toby. They could make a new flagpole out of that tall tree, Toby puffed.
It should also be noted that this time, Henry and Toby were actually breaking Rule 55, something that Wilbert was rather upset about back in Henry's forest. I like how Thomas tries to help Henry with his dilemma, which is appropriate because in the same season, Henry has also helped Thomas out when he got into trouble. Henry's conversation with Trevor is funny.
Hello, Henry. You're very nice, Trevor, puffed Henry, but you wouldn't make a very good flagpole.
The opening theme is awesome, the close-up shot of Salty crushing the flagpole is cool, and I like how Topham also cares about the pine tree and ensures Henry that it'll never be cut down. Overall, I think Henry has been handled really well in this one. He wasn't portrayed as an overly scared hypochondriac like he was in the CGI series, but instead as an overprotective gentle giant, which was definitely the right way to go. Henry has had his fair share of duds in the hit era, but I'd rather take something that tries and fails in some areas than something that is incorrect from the ground up, albeit consistent. At least no hit season fully got him wrong, and there are good Henry moments to be found in all of them.
Stop! You're not unloaded yet!
When it comes to Percy's character portrayal in the CGI series, it mostly tends to be something like this.
Hello, squirrels! Would you like to be friends with me?
Percy to the rescue! Delayed? Oh no! I only thought he was lost.
Out of my way! Mail coming through! When I'm with you, I feel most proud of all. And most special of all.
More seasons than not tend to get Percy's character completely wrong and default to him either behaving like a child, misunderstanding something, or being scared of ghosts.
Don't eat me! Don't eat me! Don't eat me!
The Brenner era isn't exactly a void of that either, but it also produced some amazing CGI Percy stories. The best example of course being Tale of the Brave, in which Percy goes through an immense character arc. Percy's spotlight episodes, for the most part, weren't about silly gimmicks or learning childish morals anymore, but about overcoming obstacles or doing a good deed for someone. Episodes such as Letters to Santa, Missing Gator, and Percy's Lucky Day are excellent examples of really well written Percy stories. One morning, Percy gets distracted while he's daydreaming, which causes him to leave the platform too soon, and thus his his mailbag pops open and all the letters scatter around the platform. His streak of bad luck continues when careless Bill and Ben leave a trail of pumpkins behind and Percy skids right into them. He later vents to Stephen about his day's events and decides to wear Lucky Horseshoe as per his suggestion. Percy, however, doesn't notice that he accidentally dropped it during his departure. Irregardless of that, things are going well for the rest of the day, and later when he spots Bill and Ben in a great heap of trouble, he steps in and rescues them from a violent casualty. By the end, Percy learns that bad luck can happen to anyone, but he shouldn't let it hinder him from being a really useful engine. This is such a clever story with such a fun cast of characters too. Hero appears and attempts to comfort Percy, Bill and Ben make their grand return to the CGI series, and Stephen's role is absolutely fantastic. Due to his lifelong experience, he knows exactly how to tackle any young engine's dilemma. I like how he admits that he doesn't believe in superstitions himself and only gave Percy his horseshoe just to make him feel better.
You know, Stephen, I don't think I believe in Lucky Charms anymore.
Well, I don't really believe in Lucky Charms either. I was just trying to cheer you up.
Thank you, Stephen. It worked.
Bill and Ben are pulled straight up from the classic series, blaming each other for something that is both their fault, provoking the other engines at any chance they get, and always coming up with a banger roast.
Why don't you try and pull Ben back to safety?
I tried that, Percy, but Ben is too heavy. I'm not heavy. Yes, you are. You weigh tons.
I find this episode to be very heartwarming. I love how Steve manages to cheer Percy up. I like the montage of Percy having a streak of good luck, and the scene where Bill and Percy manage to pull Ben back to safety is an awesome moment of heroism. There are many CGI Percy episodes that aren't very good, sadly, but Percy's Lucky Day truly leaves me feel delighted.
Is there a problem, Mr. Oliver?
Yes! There is!
Snow Engine is an episode featuring a very interesting concept. Two characters respectfully disagreeing with one another, but by the end, both of them understand where the other's POV is coming from and basically switch opinions. First of all, I ought to mention that this episode is a good example with its portrayal of Toad and Oliver's friendship. In my last video, I talked about how I don't like Oliver's portrayal in the CGI series. His character was regressed and he tended to treat Toad like a doormat, despite treating him as an equal in the model series. See Toad stands by, Oliver's find, busy going backwards, and of course, Snow Engine. When winter arrives on the island of Sodor, Toad and Oliver discuss their opinions about snow. Toad thinks it's magical, while Oliver thinks that it's nothing but trouble.
Just an observation, Mr. Oliver. Snow is magical. Pah!
It makes perfect sense for Oliver to not like snow very much. His line runs along beautiful sandy beaches which are associated with sun and warmth, so I completely comprehend that. I also like how this all concludes. Oliver is tasked to take another train in the afternoon, where in typical Sodor fashion, everything that could go wrong goes wrong. The points are frozen and Oliver can't stop himself in time, which causes him to crash through the buffers and into the snowman's stomach. Toad's iconic line will also just never get old.
That could have been a little smoother.
Overall, I find this episode to be a great example of adding layers to existing characters and how to write an entertaining story out of that.
You were right, Toad, Oliver called. There are some magical things about snow. Perhaps, Mr. Oliver, shivered Toad.
Definitely.
Well done, James, called his driver. Your hot air did the trick. Oh, no, James, cried Thomas. You saved the hot air balloon. I didn't mean to, groaned James. Now it's sure to take our passengers.
I'm gonna do something different this time. I'm not only gonna talk about the episode, but also the song that is connected to it. When Thomas delivers a new hot air balloon at Dryall Airfield one day, James suspects that it's meant to replace regular passenger trains. Thomas's excitement quickly evaporates after hearing that. Fortunately though, all the other engines across the island see sense, and instead of being worried, they're fascinated by what they saw. James and Thomas later discuss the situation at the level crossing and agree that passengers should be travelling by rail only.
If it takes our passengers away, chuffed Thomas, there'll be no use for us engines. Passengers should travel on trains, huffed James, not in silly balloons.
Presently, the balloon runs out of hot air and lands on top of James, who's able to heat it up again. When James vents to Sir Topham Hatt, he's assured that there's nothing to be worried about. James, of course, now feels foolish for believing such a silly idea in the first place, and sometimes he wishes to be able to fly himself.
And sometimes, when he's asleep at night, James dreams he can fly too, just like the red balloon.
I think now is a good time to talk about the song. I just can't put into words how much I love it. Not only for its great child chorus and a beautiful score, but about its message. It is great to be able to see so much of the island from up in the sky, yes, but the real beauty of the island is its railway network, which can't ever be taken away by anything. The song, of course, isn't just about the island of Sodor and its railway, but also about James. It really means something when James wishes to be something that isn't himself for once. Not only is he amazed by the balloon, but he sees something in it. He doesn't view it as an inanimate object, but as a friend. The song directly says so.
Waiting to see his friend, hoping he will come again.
That is so sweet and heartwarming. On the surface, this seems like another character thinks they get replaced by something type of episode. But there's so much more beneath the surface. This episode is a perfect example of character flanderization done right. Yes, I know how hypocritical that sounds, but if characters acting irrationally is done tastefully and genuinely hilarious, I don't mind it. This is another one of my favorite James and Thomas stories, and again, there is so much gold to be found here.
We're out of hot air, shouted a voice. Ah! cried James. What's happening? Crash! Bang! Wallop went the balloon.
These two are such imbeciles for actually believing that a single hot air balloon could somehow replace regular passenger service, but it's just so funny that I don't care. Season 6 is definitely the funniest season of the show, and subsequently this episode is hilarious.
So he buffered up to Luke and dropped some sand on the rail. He gave him a little push to help him on his way again.
Woo! Thanks, Duncan!
Duncan the Humbug, in all honesty, might very well be my favorite CGI episode. It's a perfect 10 out of 10 for me. Duncan has always been an absolute favorite of mine, and this episode concludes his character journey perfectly. When winter arrives on the island of Sodor, all the engines are looking forward to the holiday season. Well, except for one. Duncan hates this time of year for a number of reasons. He doesn't like to skid on icy rails, he doesn't like how cold the weather gets, he doesn't like the festive decorations, but what he despises most of all are the obnoxious songs.
But Duncan didn't like it at all. He was about to give them a blast from his whistle.
Duncan's complaining puts the other engines in a sour mood, but Rusty gets an idea on how to make him stop complaining for one day. He tells Peregrine Percival about it, who subsequently tells Duncan. The deal is that Duncan is not allowed to complain or lose his temper for one day, and if he manages to do that, he will receive a fresh coat of paint. Duncan is eager to keep a smile on his face, and you can tell it's hard for him. That is until he encounters Luke on a hill, who ran out of sand and is therefore struggling to get on top.
For buffer's sake, Luke, what's the hold-up?
Sorry, Duncan. I can't go on because my wheels keep slipping on the icy track.
Can't you just grit it up with a little sand?
I'm afraid my sandbox is empty.
Duncan finally realizes how his grumpy behavior can hurt the other engine's feelings, and in an attempt to make it up to Luke, he pushes him up the hill. Rusty, meanwhile, has seen everything from a distance. The next morning, Duncan makes his way up to the steamworks to admit to Mr. Percival that he had lost the wager.
Good morning, sir. I know I failed your challenge and I wasn't cheerful all day, but...
Say no more, Duncan. You did a good thing yesterday, helping out poor Luke when he was in a spot of bother.
Oh, well, I suppose maybe I did.
However, this isn't all that happens here. What I absolutely love the most about the story is that it's one of those cases where both sides of the conflict are right and wrong in their own ways. I am so glad that Duncan's side is given just as much acknowledgement as the other engines and Mr. Percival's side. In the previous Duncan episode called Duncan and the Grumpy Passenger, the ending implies that Duncan is capable of changing his way, albeit only in a rather vague ending. And that is where this episode comes into play. I love how the moral is that you should leave other people be as long as they aren't doing any harm. Yes, Duncan was complaining a lot, but to be fair to him, what damage did he cause by doing that? It's just the way Duncan is, and if he stopped his complaining once and for all, would he even still be the same engine? There is a clear distinction to be made between grumbling about something you don't like and losing your temper with someone, and this is exactly what everyone learns in this episode. You can't force others to like the same things you like, and you can't force them on how to behave either, but simultaneously, if you are hurting other people's feelings, you should work on your attitude. I, as a fellow SP, find Duncan to be very relatable. I too am expected to deal with other people's shit and to suck it up without any complaint, but if I rightfully put other people's mood down in return to show them what I feel like all the time, people are shocked by it and won't comprehend that they're doing the exact same thing to me. Duncan in general is written fantastically in this one. He's unfiltered and will voice his opinion about everything because he simply doesn't care about what other people think. He won't change for anyone because no one will change for him either.
You've been making everyone feel unhappy, and when engines aren't happy, they don't work so well.
That's just the way I am, and you can like it or not.
He won't stand having to change his ways for other people's approval, but just this once, he actually tries to act unlike his usual self, which of course doesn't work, but thankfully it didn't matter. The others now understand that Duncan's grumbling doesn't affect his usefulness, but Duncan too tries his best to be more cheerful from now on. A flawless conclusion to Duncan's character journey.
Dear, look, it's young Bao. It's such a shame he'll never be able to pull passenger coaches like us. He's far too unimportant.
I know this will come as a surprise, but Yong Bao and the Tiger truly deserves to be on the list for it being the only good example of an international episode done right. You know what? I would even go as far as to say that this is a great episode. Yes, it is plagued with stupid bouncing, lack of physics, and Thomas as the narrator, which are common problems in this era, but honestly, none of those things distract from the greatness of this story. One morning, Thomas becomes curious as to why Yong Bao has an emblem of a tiger painted on his tender, and as per Lei's suggestion, Thomas asks him how he got it. This is the story that Yong Bao told him. Many years ago, Yong Bao, who was painted blue back then, worked as a shunter in the yard and was often reminded that this was the only thing he could do by two mean engines. Yong Bao, however, didn't take any notice and focused on his work instead. But still, Yong Bao desired to be an important engine himself, and whenever he was alone, he imagined so too. One evening, he discovered a lost tiger that has made its way into the shunting yard, but it quickly hid away when the two mean engines returned. When Yong Bao searched for it the next morning, he couldn't find it anywhere. Months went by, and still there was no sign of the tiger anywhere. But one day, Yong Bao had had enough and decided to venture out of the yard and to look for it in the mountains, where he finally rediscovered it. The tiger showed him that one of the mean engines has had a nasty accident, so he quickly rushed to the rescue, saving the engine and the passengers. Yong Bao's controller declared him a hero that evening, and as per his wish, he was not only given a red coat of paint, but also a tiger on his tender. What an incredible episode. In fact, there are so many things that deserve to be talked about, so let's go through them. The score is an absolute blast. The music that plays when Yong Bao rediscovers the tiger and when he rescues the mean engine and his passengers is absolutely breathtaking. I really like how Yong Bao's backstory mirrors Thomas's, which is appropriate with this being the final season, and I also like how Yong Bao doesn't take shit from anyone. He's above petty rivalries and doesn't take any rude remarks personally. I just really like Yong Bao in general. I never had an issue with him prior, but there wasn't all that much to him. This episode, however, truly made me care about him. I also love how the tiger portrayed as a guardian angel. Yong Bao states that he never saw the tiger again after this, and it's up to the viewer's interpretation if there is more to the tiger beneath the surface.
With each passing day, I thought more and more about the tiger. I wondered what it was doing and hoped it was safe.
The passage of time was also a great addition to the story, because it truly makes you understand why Yong Bao decided to wander off one day, and thankfully he did, because otherwise the engine and the passengers would have all died. Season 24, while not a good season at all, was definitely an improvement to the previous two Blubber seasons. The animation got noticeably better, the writing improved with the removal of shoehorning fantasy sequences into every episode, only one international episode per country, and decent continuity throughout the season. Little Thomas grew up and adopted Fuzzy, Emily gained her number, Thomas mentioned a costume contest in India at one point, Sunny's character arc, and Kenji and Hiro's departure. A very bittersweet season, because it does have a bit of finality to it, albeit not much. And there you have it, folks, 10 more hidden gems of Thomas and Friends that you should go and check out. It was fun to spotlight episodes from every era this time around, and to show that even the worst eras of the franchise have their moments hidden somewhere. I wanted to spread everything as evenly as I could, with 5 model episodes and 5 CGI episodes. I find this video to be very appropriate as a celebration of 40 years of the show, where every era gets some love. If you have any opinions on the episodes I've talked about in this video, feel free to comment them down below. And what I think would also be interesting are episodes that you consider to be hidden gems, along with explanations as to why you think that those episodes should get more recognition. That way we could collect more episodes that everyone sleeps on and shed some love to some of the lesser discussed grades this franchise has to offer. Thank you all so much for your patience and gracious support. Now let's all get together and celebrate our favorite franchise's anniversary.